my talk today was on the research methods that are used to study mind wandering in psychology and cognitive science. And it starts from this really interesting feature of the mind. So some parts of your mind are active, right? Choices, intentions, decisions, volitions. They're all things that you can do pretty much immediately when you want to. So if I asked you to raise your left hand, you could do it right now, no problem. Other parts of your mind are passive, right? Your beliefs, your desires. If I tell you to believe something, you can't do it right away in the same way that you can raise your left hand. And the mind is this really interesting mixture of these two elements. And I think mind wandering is one of these more passive elements. It's not something you can do whenever somebody asks you to do it. It's also not something that is required to really do anything, perform any task that we might use in psychological research. And that generates this interesting need for certain kinds of research methods in psychology, in particular the use of self-report. And what that means is, in order to study mind wandering, what you have to do is you have to go up and ask people, are you mind wandering? And they'll say yes or no. If they say yes, you figure out what's going on beforehand, start to build a scientific theory of mind wandering. And while that has generated a lot of interesting research about mind wandering, there's also some philosophical puzzles related to that kind of methodology. So on the one hand, there are questions about how often do you probe people. There's a question about what sort of theory of mind wandering should we use. But there are even more global problems that kind of center on the fact that people are really bad at figuring out what's going on inside of their minds. So I ask you if you're mind wandering, but I can't really be sure that you and I mean the same thing by mind wandering, and that you even understand what it means to mind wander. And so what I propose today is that in order to get around these skeptical problems, we need to have a good metaphysical account of what mind wandering is and how mind wandering is a part of our agency and how we act over time. And what I think is really interesting about that is it represents a bridge between psychology and philosophy. So as psychologists and philosophers start working together more, what philosophers can contribute is good conceptual groundwork, making sure that we have a good understanding of the metaphysics of the things we're studying. That then informs good research. It helps us to develop good experiments, helps us to develop good measurements, and it helps us to form good inferences. And so I think what's interesting about mind wandering in terms of interdisciplinarity is it's very important for philosophers and psychologists to work with each other to understand what mind wandering is before we can develop good and interesting theories about mind wandering in psychology and cognitive science.